So we'll get things started for this module today. In the next hour, we're really going to jump into getting to know the front door, and we have Ruby and Crystal here with us who are going to bring us through this module. So I'm going to pass it along to them, and they'll take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Krista. Hi, everybody. Love being in this space with you. I would love to introduce my friend and colleague, Crystal Duncan, who is full-time staff at our Recovery Cafe, our South Lake Union location. Crystal is our kitchen manager. And that means she does all things to keep us healthily and well-fed, but that she also supports the management of the floor. So she does many things and has a broad experience for many years at the cafe. So Crystal, I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks, Ruby.
And maybe I'll share my screen in a minute. Our hope in this conversation is to go a little bit more into the details of what it looks like to practice loving accountability. We've used that word in many spaces. So here's the beginning of that conversation. So I'm going to try to share my screen and you tell me if I've done that right.
Yep.
Did that work? Yeah, awesome. Okay, so let's move right into this. Let's see. Yep. So we're hoping to talk about today, and we've set aside an hour, so please put your questions in the chat or raise your hand if somebody would flag us if there's a hand raised. But there's also time at the end that we will have more time for conversation and questions. So lots of ways to have input into this piece. So we want to touch on the front door and how that helps you implement your program and practice loving accountability. And also tie back to what we just heard about from Rachel Marin in the previous session about agency. It's not just for tracking, for reporting, but it's also for a daily use and support of your program. So when we talk about loving accountability, it's really key to take a step back and remember that accountability is in the context of our 3 membership agreements. Remember yesterday, Ken Goldstein spoke to us about where we are on the continuum of care and that we're not drop-in and we're not treatment, but we're a membership model. And that model is built around some agreements that we as the cafe structure makes with members to form a community. And that is that they will be drug and alcohol free for 24 hours before coming to the cafe. They will participate in a weekly recovery circle, and that they will contribute or give back in some way. So those are the things that we're wanting to hold each other accountable to in a loving way. So the front door is really one of the first places where we do that. So that's why we're spending so much time on it today. You've heard about radical hospitality from us, loving accountability, we've said a million times. Resources are available at our front desk. The piece I want to touch on in this slide is that it's an opportunity for a competing healing response. We also spoke yesterday about kind of our rationale or the concepts behind our programming. And I think this one touches on it, this opportunity for a competing healing response that many of us in this room, many of our members that come to our community have had rather unfriendly, harmful, hurtful, traumatic even responses from other people just for being who they are. And so when they come to us at our front door, it's our opportunity to offer a competing response, to do something different that communicates something radically different than they might have experienced at other people's front door. So it really is a key part of how you welcome people to your space. So we spoke about it many times. And again, you'll have these slides, so this is a placeholder to remind us to keep thinking about what that looks like. So before we pivot to the actual implementation of what that looks like in the one-on-one conversation, we're going to touch on what are some practical things that you want to be thinking about as you create your space and set up your front door. So we'll touch on space, who needs to be there, staffing, what materials you need, and the audience. And by that we mean who are the people that you're likely to see at your front door. So let's move on. So space. Again, this is something we've talked about, and you'll hear throughout today many things that we've mentioned yesterday as well. That when we think about that front door, it really has to be a single point of entry. Because if we're creating structures and community that hold people with loving accountability, we have to have encounters. And if there are multiple points of entry, we won't be able to keep track of that. So just a single way into your community helps you make sure that you greet each person consistently. It's ideal if your front door is connected to your milieu, to your healing community space, so that you can have visibility and you can see who's in the space and how things are going with the newcomer. And this third one, a place to engage people, is just, I think we might have some photos in other presentations. There's a warm seating area that's not quite in the milieu, but close to the front door, where we can engage with people and be comfortable and welcoming. So because Crystal is our expert on implementation and in the on the ground work, I'm going to pass the baton to her to talk about what materials are needed at the front desk and how that looks. Crystal?
Yeah, thank you, Ruby. So at our front desk, we have our computer with agency access. It's important to have agency at the front desk so that we can keep record of who's in the space. And we also like to keep a lot of resource for like pages at the front for food banks, other resources around the area, our meetings that we have that are available, things that are happening at the cafe. Those are things that we like to have at the front for information for people when they come in.
Yep. Chris, you want to talk about the M&E forms and
oh yeah, I'm sorry about that.
it's okay.
Our M&E forms are forms for people to fill out for when they come in as guests, so we can just get a little bit of information from them and be able to have record of them in our agency.
One of the things I really appreciate about all those forms and pieces of information at the front desk is that Crystal and the team really work hard to create opportunities for people. So for example, in Seattle, the cafe is closed on Thanksgiving Day and the day after. Just so the staff also can have time to restore and be with their smaller communities. And so what Crystal's team has put together is who else is open on Thanksgiving and the day after Thanksgiving, so that someone comes to the door and we have to say we won't be open tomorrow, but here's who is. So it's not just resources internally, it's resources externally available at your front door as part of that engagement piece.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ruby.
Yeah. What about staffing at the front door, Crystal?
Yes, so it is very important that we have at least one staff member at the front door at all times. We cannot leave the front door unattended. If we do leave the front door unattended, that invites people in that we don't have control over the who's coming in the door. That doesn't give us the opportunity to have conversations with the people that are coming in and be able to direct them and help them and support them in the way that we need to. So it's very important that we have somebody at the front door to welcome people in. And it's also important for the members to be able to help welcome other people into the community. It gives them an opportunity to engage with other people within the community. And it just gives them the opportunity to feel more welcomed. You're muted, Ruby.
Sorry. Want to mention here, because Rachel Marin just did a nice segment on agency in the last hour. And so when Crystal is talking about being at the front desk with a staff person, with a member leader who was helping her be welcoming and warm, the member does not have access to the screen that's in agency, because people here, I mean, this conversation in this group was so nice. I was so nice, happy to hear your concern about privacy and respect for the individual's information. So members do not have access to that front door screen. Maybe Crystal, say a word about all the different kinds of people. You never know what's going to walk through that front door. Say a word about who you encounter on a daily basis.
On a daily basis, we have people. Sometimes we encounter guests who are just wanting to come in and check out the cafe, see what it's about. Oftentimes we have just community volunteers that come in, and some of them just help like serve food and things like that. Some of them are our cafe companions that come in and really try to build a relationship with our members and really just get a sense of who they are and really just connect with the community itself. Sometimes we have just people that are looking for food sometimes, and that's okay. We try to invite them in and welcome them into the cafe and show them what the cafe is about in hopes that they would be interested in becoming a member. And then we have our everyday members, the ones that are here almost every day, that we just love and welcome in every single day. Oh, you're on mute.
I think, does it automatically mute me when somebody else is talking? Because
I don't think it should, Ruby. Maybe it's because you have your AirPods in.
oh, okay.
Sorry, Ruby, I have been muting you because there's feedback when Crystal starts talking. I don't know if it's helping, but that's what I'm doing.
Oh, thank you for saying that, Mike, because I was thinking this computer is a personal thing against me. So please keep doing that and then turn me back on. Thanks, Crystal. And I was mentioning about language. So we internally have tried to think through what does it mean for someone to be a guest, and what does it mean for someone to be a visitor? And there's a wide range of who's in that bucket. A person might be new to us because they're interested in membership and they want to check us out and see how they might join the community. That's a guest for the day. A person might be a visitor or a guest of a member. So I'm a member and my cousins are coming in to visit from Alaska, and they're not going to be living in Seattle, but I want them to come experience my wonderful time at the cafe. So they're my personal guest as a member, and I'm able to do that, and they can enter the cafe. Or there might be a visitor, might be a partner service provider, maybe someone's case manager from another group, someone's housing support person who wants to check out where their member is in community. So lots of different ways a person can be in your space without technically being an official member or a community volunteer or a staff person. So finding a way to know who those folks are and keep track of that is a part of what happens at the front door.
Yeah. Sometimes we also have providers as well that come in.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. You want to say what about that, Crystal? Say more.
Yeah. Sometimes we have different such as we have a foot care clinic and helps our members take care of their feet. We have county nurses that come in and provide like hand washing training, like a big kind of thing, a hand washing class, or ways to keep yourself healthy, things like that, that they come in and talk about here at the cafe. And those are other people that might be part of your audience.
Thanks, Crystal. So just another plug for Loving Accountability, that this whole conversation is about what are the structures at the front door that help you do what we're hoping to do really well as we build community and love people and support their recovery journeys. So we're going to move now into a little bit more depth and turn the baton over to Crystal to talk about how agency supports the front door more specifically. Rachel Marin, please feel free to jump in at any time. But just as a frame, you're at the front desk the person that has walked through the door is a member potentially, or is a member who's enrolled in a circle. And so what does that conversation look like is we first screen for 24 hours drug and alcohol free. We've talked earlier, there's no formal testing, so we don't do UAs, we don't ask for reports. It's a conversation. And our primary way of doing that is by behavioral indicators. Are they smelling of alcohol? Well, first of all, do they tell us that they have 24 hours? Yes, great. If their behavior suggests otherwise, that leads to a conversation. We tend to err on the side of allowing entry. If someone says, for example, yeah, I'm a little jumpy today, or I'm a little more drowsy because of my appropriately prescribed physician prescription. So that's why I'm presenting behaviorally as not looking quite myself. So we will acknowledge that and then just remind them, great, we want to support you with all of that. And let's work together on being a community. And then if they're not able to be in the space behaviorally, they're outbursts or they're falling asleep at the table, we will ask them to come back another day. So it's kind of a hands-on, eyes-on conversation. I don't think I said that clearly, but we'll keep going. All right, Crystal, you're at the front door. Someone walks in and says, I'm a member. And what do you do?
Well, at that point, we would record the member entry to check and see if they are in fact a member. If they are, it will pop up and it will show us that they are in fact a member, they are enrolled in a circle, and then it will show if they have good attendance in their circle or not, or if they've came in too many times as a guest and are not enrolled in the circle. Yes. This screen is showing us that Ariel is in fact eligible for entry. This is what the screen will look like if you've entered in somebody and it shows that they are eligible for entry. They have good attendance in their circle and they are enrolled in the circle. So that's what this screen on the left will show you. The screen on the right will show you that they are ineligible for entry, meaning that they are either not enrolled in a circle or they are and have not attended their circle. And in that case, we will have to have a conversation.
Mm-hmm. So this is the place where loving accountability happens, because their agreement to being at a circle. And we know life happens. So if a person can't be at their circle, they can certainly call ahead to say, I've got a doctor's appointment, I'm not feeling well, yada, yada. And we say, great, thanks for being accountable. We will mark you as excused.
Yeah.
So if someone comes to the front door, Crystal puts Ruby's name in, and I have not called to be excused, so I'm technically just a no-show. This is what she will see. Then she starts to ask me, hey, Ruby, what happened? And a whole long conversation about all the reasons I may or may not have forgotten to call in.
Ruby, I'm gonna hop in for a second. We have 2 questions that came up in the chat, or
Great.
3 now. The
Okay.
first one is, how many times is too many as a guest?
Oh, that's 3. 3 times is too many as a guest. By the 3rd time, you need to be enrolled in new members introduction and be in a circle.
That's such a brilliant question, because we're going to get to that in a future slide. But
Yeah.
we, and because members told us, we want to have people in our space who are committed to the same recovery journey and the structure as we are. So multiple guest times doesn't create that sense of accountability in the whole space. So 3 is our
Yes, 3 is our
3 is our benchmark, and then there are conversations. Because if I was a visitor 3 times in 1985, and now it's 2023. I want to be a guest again. Absolutely, it's my 4th visit, but it's totally okay. So there's all this, there's wiggle room. Always for a rule, the purpose of a rule is to bounce up against and allow you to have a conversation that helps you figure out, in this case, how can you make it work for the person?
Yes.
Thanks, Julia, for that question. Is there another
That is
question?
true. There's always the it depends. Oftentimes we do see people that go through the patterns of wanting to, oh, today they're gonna make an effort, they're gonna try to go get clean, they're gonna do this, they're gonna work on their recovery, and then sometimes they come in as a guest, and they're gonna come back for new members introduction, and then sometimes it doesn't work the way that they were planning on it. Things happen, they'll come in a couple months down the road and want to come in as a guest again and try to make an effort to continue to try to become a member. And then sometimes it does work out, sometimes it doesn't. So we still will give them the opportunity to come in and be a guest for the day in hopes that they'll come back tomorrow and become a member.
Thank you, Crystal. Yeah, we have 2 more questions in the chat from Elizabeth. Elizabeth asked, are we taking a picture or how do we identify them?
So we do have pictures of our members in agency. We do take a picture of them and we have them, the picture loaded to their profile. Some of our members we don't have pictures of, we just are hoping that they're going to give us their name that will be attached to their agency profile.
A person can choose not to have their photo taken, but we certainly try to do that. Great question. And it's really fun when you've got a member for a long time, because now we've got people who've been members for like, 10, 15 years, and their
Yeah.
photo has changed. It's really fun to see them as young people.
Thank you. And the last question is there a certain software provided to use for data entry or do we create our own system?
Rachel Marin, Rachel Marin, I think the answer to that is agency is the data system. Is that how we should answer that question?
Yes, thanks, Ruby.
Okay. You'd think that'd be easy for me, but to double check. Please keep the questions coming. All right. So Crystal, here's another screenshot of what the agency, 2 screenshots of the agency page looks like and how it can serve you. This is the database itself. You want to
Yes.
say a word?
Yes, I will. So this is a flag for the front door that we have that we can add in on agency. And this will flag a member's profile. So when we type them in to record them as a member that's coming into the cafe, if there's a flag on their profile, it will pop up and then we can click on it and we can look at the message that we have. Other staff members are the people that would be adding these flags into agency. So like if someone, like a member's mother called for them and left a message, we could add it to a flag so that when they come in, we can remember to give them that message. Or if the member had an outburst or something happened where they are not able to come into the cafe, or a conversation with them needs to happen because of their behavior before they enter the cafe again because they left angry or upset, that's where we would add this flag in so that when they come through the front door, we can say, hey, we need to have a conversation. And that's how we'll know to have that conversation is by having that flag at the front door.
Krista, I love that you use the example of someone's mom calls to leave a message for them. So again, this group has asked such great questions about privacy. So there is in our enrollment process, a place where we ask members, are there folks that we have permission to speak to if they call us or if we're concerned about your well-being, and they will let us know who those people are. So if an external person like a mom calls and say, I want to get in touch with, I'm looking at Mike Scott's mom calls, I'm going to check on Mike, see how he's doing. If Mike has not given us permission to speak to his mother, we would say, we can't acknowledge that we know Mike, but if he's here, we'll pass that message along. And that's where we'll flag it, let the member know, and the member decides whether or not, Mike decides whether or not to call his mom, which he normally does.
We had another question pop into the chat that is asking from Cheryl, where, when, and with whom is that difficult conversation had about their entry?
Oh, fantastic question, Crystal. You can take that.
So where, it depends on the nature of the conversation that has to happen. So if it's a conversation that's pretty personal, like, something like say their behavior was really bad and they were rude to staff, and left angry, then we would ask them to maybe come into like an office or a space that is a little more private, and we always bring another staff member, and that is the way we usually do it, so that there's two people in the room with the person. We're having a conversation about their behavior and what has happened, and we try to make a good thing come out of that, and so that they can be welcomed back into the space. But we also want to hold them accountable for what they've, their actions. We want to correct their actions and help them be able to be back in the space. If it's just a, hey, there's a message for you kind of conversation, that can just be had at the front. That seems fine to me, as long as it's not like a super personal message that needs to be conveyed to them. Use your best judgment is what I would say for the conversation. Yeah.
I'm going to go back to this slide. So this, to answer that question, this is a part of that response, because
Yes.
what we have is, and you can determine how this looks. We have a front door counter where people are greeted. Then right across there is a seating area, a couple of benches where if the conversation is somewhere in the middle between a quick one or an in-depth one that requires an office space, Crystal can go around and just sit down and have that mutual conversation versus this confrontational conversation at the front desk.
Yeah.
So, be creative, and it depends on the situation. One caveat is, yes, sometimes when people are upset and angry because if we're asking them, we feel like we would not be serving you or loving you in the way that we need to if we didn't ask you to come back next week to your circle, and in the meantime not be in the cafe. Sometimes those are difficult conversations, especially if the person is not drug and alcohol free. Then that conversation says, hey, let's chat about it on the sidewalk. And so we invite people to sit out front. We have a bench outside the cafe. So that's another space where that conversation can happen if that person doesn't have 24 hours. Is it
Yeah.
accurate, Crystal?
Yes, it is. And also, I was going to add, also, we do have like meetings, the NA and AA meetings, that we can also offer to them as an alternative support, because they can go to those meetings even if they're not 24 hours, but they're not within our actual space of where the other members are at. So that they have some support. We're not leaving them without support, but they're unable to be in the community of the cafe because they haven't attended their circle or they don't have 24 hours.
Mhm.
And Ruby and Crystal, excuse me, part of the question Cheryl had is with whom? So I assume it's with the lead person at the front desk. But if that person has to be pulled away, then I guess you invite another staff person to be at the front desk for a time. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Great catch. Thanks. Right. So our hope is that front door has at least one. And by that, it means there's another person maybe right next door in the office that they can call upon to do that. Absolutely. And sometimes if we're not able, because we're short staffed and there's only one staff person at the front desk that cannot be pulled away for that conversation, we may ask the member, can you come back in an hour? Can you come back tomorrow to speak with so-and-so? Because sometimes those conversations are better had with particular staff member if that particular staff member is the person with whom the member had a conflict. So we may, there's the where, the when, the who varies by situation. Thanks for that, Mike. Julia's nodding because she has done this full time for a year at least.
Yeah.
Are there other questions in the chat, Julia? Okay. So thanks so much for your questions. This is exactly what we were hoping would happen, and I'm sure as you really think through what it might look like in your space, so you don't have the exact same setup, how to implement, your questions will continue to come. So please reach out to us. We thought for this conversation, we've already been doing it, but that we would spend some time doing scenarios, and with Krista and Julia and front door experience people in the room, be a good time to do that. So here's a scenario, jump in, add your questions. You're at the front desk, and what would you do in this case? Someone walks in, you put their name into, you type the name into agency. Ariel does not pop up with her happy song. The other side, the yellow box pops up. This person is ineligible for entry because they didn't come to their circle and they didn't call to be excused. So then what do you do next? That could happen for a lot of reasons. So what might you do next? So here's what we think would happen, is a meaningful conversation to ask what happened, what made that phone call not possible. I would love if you would put in the chat any of your comments or thought, or what you think you might say. And for those of you that are actively in recovery communities, maybe not a cafe yet, but in your different settings, how do you have these conversations? I can't see if there's stuff coming up, so
There's nothing coming into the
nothing?
chat right
Okay.
now.
Thanks, Julia. I think I would say this is the conversation we've just been having over the last few minutes, that the staff person really has a lot of discretion. Once we know what the parameters are of accountability and sobriety for that 24 hours and attendance, once those are in place, the staff can ask questions that help you navigate when to make the exception. And as we've mentioned, sometimes we will ask that person, you've missed 3 times in a row. Is this because Monday at 4 o'clock is a bad time? Would you like a different circle? You want to ask that question? Or how can we help you? Do you need a bus ticket to get here sooner after work? What problem solving is part of the conversation? And if those are exhausted, then it may come to, we're not supporting or serving you if we don't hold you to your best self of coming to circle or calling. So we're going to ask that you not be in the space today and come back, is one answer. Or you might say, oh my gosh, Julia, I'm looking at your agency record, because agency can pull up Julia's previous attendance, and she has been faithful to her circle every week for 2 months. And this is her first accidental absence because she lost her phone. Then we would say, Julia, of course, let's help you figure out how to get another phone and come on in. So here's the case where 2 different people, same behavior of not having come to their circle with calling, but different response on our part.
Yeah.
And Ruby, we have some stuff coming into the chat now. Virginia suggested saying, I'm glad you stopped in. Nina suggested asking if they're okay and what's going on. Rachel added, it's nice to see you. We missed you at Circle last week. What was going on with you last week? Ken said, it depends. How often does it happen with this member? Are they often AWOL, or is this the first time? And Vicky also added, I think relationship background with the member would make a difference. We also had 2 questions come into the chat as well.
Okay.
Elizabeth asked, how often are they required to attend Circle? And Cheryl asked, how do they attend Circle if they're denied entry?
Great questions, Crystal.
Okay. They are required to attend a once weekly recovery circle. So they are supposed to attend it once weekly. After 3 missed attendances, we disenroll them from the circle usually. Depends on if it's something that happens all the time, like they're constantly absent, so we will disenroll if they're constantly absent. If we feel like that's the way that we need to be holding them accountable, is by telling them, hey, you know, you've missed too many times. Now you have to go through the new member intro process, which is basically just a reminder of what the agreements of the cafe are for them, so that they can understand that this is what we expect out of the membership. And if they won't be denied entry if it's their circle day and they're coming in. So if they're coming in for their circle, but they've missed circles like the last 2 times. So if they're coming in on that 3rd time and it's their circle day, of course we say, hey, you know, you missed your circle, make sure you're coming today to your circle, and then we allow them to come in. But if it's not their circle day, we'll ask them to come back on their circle day to come in.
Great question. Does that answer it for the person? I can't see. You all, I have to say, as Julia was reading what you're putting in the chat, you're gonna make me cry. Because that's beautiful, and that's exactly that's radical hospitality in the chat. To first engage with, good to see you, welcome back, how you doing, versus you didn't come into your circle. It is just the whole stance of the warmth and welcome that we're hoping our cafes embody. So thank you. That's an example of competing response. So many other, at least in my experience, treatment providers, service providers, they start with the scold. So that you all started with the love is just breaking my heart right open.
Ruby, we have one more question that came in, or 2 more. There we go. We got lots
Okay.
coming. Ricky asked, how do you handle a mentally unstable individual? And Barbara asked, are they not able to participate in any circle? I'm not sure who the they is referring to.
I'm thinking they're saying, are members not allowed to attend any circle? No, so they will, we have a sheet usually of facilitators and their time that they facilitate that circle, and they can pick from different, like, so we'll have Julia is facilitating an 11 o'clock circle on Wednesday. I'm facilitating a 1 o'clock circle on Wednesday. They have to pick which circle they're going to attend weekly, and that's their one that they go to every week. They don't get to hop around to other circles. They go to the one that they've chosen to go that will fit their schedule best, and that's the one that they attend. And to answer the other question is, how do you handle a mentally unstable individual? So sometimes it depends on how severe the mental instability is. If they are able to track and hold a conversation and are able to be in the cafe and not be disruptive, we are able to usually serve them. If they are unable to maintain in the cafe and not be disruptive, and are able to track and hold conversations that are meaningful with people and able to be on behavior, then we have to ask them to leave usually. Sometimes we cannot support those people. And sometimes we have to ask them to bring back proof that they are seeing a mental health care provider, so that we know that they're receiving mental health. Sometimes we ask for an ROI so that we can talk to that mental health care provider so that we can better understand and support the person.
Thanks, Crystal. These are great questions. I would say, as you are launching your cafes, that all this will unfold in ways that, as Crystal's describing, but where we started was at the barest minimum to engage in membership. The individual has to be able to give and receive information, because they have to understand what the membership model is, and they have to be able to share in circle. So if someone comes to our front door who is mental health symptoms are so severe, agitation so severe, they're not able to give and receive information, then we ask them they can be a guest for the day, perhaps, have a meal. We try to find out what resources they need and how they can access supports to get to a place where they're stable enough to give and receive information. So they may be a guest for that day, but the next day then we would recognize that we would ask them to do that before coming back. Crystal's talking about other mental health providers. We try to have resource partners because when someone comes in with those concerns, sometimes they're not connected to mental health services. That's the resource access that can happen as a part of membership. We will send someone out into the community to get that treatment elsewhere so that we can preserve our community support. But we want to maintain that relationship so that the therapist knows, hey, you are doing your awesome work in your office. We want to be the community support. So let us know how that person's doing, and we will let you know when we think someone is needing a little extra support. So we will do that as well. If we have signed permissions, we will call therapists. I do it all the time. You know, this person is looking a little less able to function right now, and it's having a hard time getting into their appointment with you. How can we troubleshoot to get them in? So it's kind of a long-winded answer to your question about mental health, but I wonder if that has answered your question.
We
those
just had another question come in from Ricky,
Okay.
asking, when interfacing with a member that might be violent towards staff at the front door, what is your protocol?
If they're being violent, we will call police to come and assist. We also have been trained in de-escalation to try to de-escalate the situation. And then we kind of have been trained to sort of not super closely, but kind of corral them towards the door. And then we usually will open the door and encourage them to go out. If they're being violent and are being mean to staff, we try to get them outside. Sometimes we try to say, hey, let's have a conversation outside if they're not being super violent towards staff, but are still able to calm down and hold a conversation. That way we can get them out of the cafe and maybe still see what is going on with them and how we can support them from outside. We don't really want to have them inside and disrupting the cafe. So we'll try to urge them out the door and maybe sit on the bench and have a conversation with them if it's possible.
And what Crystal's describing is COVID threw a loop, but previously we would try to have annual staff trainings to remind each other what our protocol is for handling that kind of situation. One example would be we have a code word for when someone is having a really tense conversation that we're concerned about. I might say to the member next to me, can you go get Crystal and ask her if Matthew's working? We don't have a Matthew on staff. That person tells Crystal, that's my message. Crystal knows, come help Ruby. So you will develop a communication strategy on your team. So we have ways of recognizing that we will need backup and how to communicate that. These are such great questions and so complex, we can't answer in a few minutes, but we've got time over 2 years or however long our relationship to do this together.
I see a question.
But what you're balancing is trying to express radical hospitality, recovery support for this individual in front of you at the front door. And you as staff, you're also balancing the good of the community, the milieu. So that's where if someone's floridly mental health issues, but it doesn't seem to be bothering the floor, you could take a little bit more time to work with that. But if it's agitating or traumatizing everybody else on the floor, you need to act more quickly, get that person out of the cafe, speak on the sidewalk to sort of manage both worlds, the individual and the larger milieu. Sorry, Crystal, I interrupted.
No, that's okay. I was just, so it says printed goals and objectives, do's and don'ts might work as a printed boards. That's what somebody has posted. So we have in our cafe our printed out, Ruby, help me, what's the word I'm looking for? Our give
The
back
summary of
policies.
policies.
Guiding principles.
Got it?
Yeah, Sorry. Yes, we have our guiding principles printed out. And we ask that members follow the guiding principles in the cafe. Yes, we do print them out on the board.
Great questions, thanks. I think these are all great scenarios. I'm wondering if, yep, so here's one. Thank you, Ashley Welch, for creating these. Member comes to the front door. We ask if they're drug and alcohol free. They say yes, but we're not quite sure because we know them well and this is different for them with slurred speech. What would we do next? Based on the conversation we just had, what are your thoughts? Anything coming in, Julia? Not yet. Here's what you do. It depends. There's a policy, there's guidelines, but it goes back to have a conversation. We're going to ask you because that's the accountability piece. Do you have 24 hours? We ask them, they say yes. We can say, okay, we trust you, we believe you. Remember our guiding principles to be respectful, encourage growth, show compassion toward others, all that good stuff. And if that's hard for you today because whatever's going on for you, we're going to ask you to leave. So again, relying on behavior, trusting their word. And unless, of course, they're smelling of alcohol or other substances, in which case we would say, yes, maybe you didn't smoke that pot in the last 24 hours, but your clothes are still smelling like that, and that's still hurtful or harmful to others. So please go home, change your clothes, and come back. Sorry, Julia.
No, thank you. There's a comment from Lynn and Tammy that says check in with them and make sure that they aren't having a medical issue also.
Absolutely. Yep.
And Dina added, have a conversation and ask them to return on a day that they feel better. And Ricky asked, can you explain to us your process when interfacing with members that are currently participating in medically assisted programs such as methadone, Suboxone, cannabis treatment programs?
We absolutely are a place that welcomes all pathways to recovery and are very invested in creating a space where that is welcome, so people can be on the recovery journey. We do ask that if they're in MAT or other assisted treatments, that they comply. So it's, I don't know what else how else to. If they're in compliance with what's been medically prescribed, then it's okay with us.
Yeah.
Unless they're nodding off.
Yeah.
Right. They're nodding off. We say, you know what, can we have permission? Would it help you? Would it be supportive if we called your provider to say your dose is too high because you're nodding off in this space? And we have that conversation. But if they can't stay awake, we ask them to come back when they can.
Ruby, can I add something in here?
Yeah.
So I'd also want to make sure that they or I want to ask a clarifying question actually. If they are on that prescription medication, are they allowed to take it on site, or is that something that they have to do somewhere else?
So typically MAT, methadone, and Suboxone would be administered elsewhere. If you're thinking about medical marijuana, we ask people that they not be in a space smelling of it and that they not do their prescribed medical marijuana on site. Yeah. You know, people used to roll cigarettes in our space, and even that, I would say, you know what? I know that's technically okay, but I think that's troubling to other people around you. Let's talk about that. So there's always space for a conversation. Because part of the recovery journey is recognizing that we're in community and how my behavior affects other people's behavior. Does that answer your question, Ashley?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I think let's pivot. You are such a. The last few slides are kind of summarizing where I think we were. Again, you're going to have these available to you, and we're going to try to walk through it by way of summary. So Ashley Welch, jump in with corrections. Rachel Marin, jump in with corrections, and Crystal, help me make sure I get through this okay. So you're at the front door, a guest comes in. We've talked a lot about enrolled members, people who are in your system. This is a conversation about when someone is not yet a member and they're a guest, and you want to introduce them to your community. So a person who's coming to your front door who's not a member is a guest. And it's either their first time, they're a brand new guest. And that process is, hey, welcome, throw on the love, fill out a guest form that Rachel Marin mentioned an hour ago, create a guest profile, enter them in agency. That allows you to track that this is their first guest visit. Remember that a person can be a guest up to 3 times before we really ask them to make a decision before coming back. Will you be a member? So a person could be a guest, but they could be a returning guest. If they've come before and they fill out the guest form, they're a returning guest on day 2, you can also then record that in agency. That means twice in agency. How am I doing, ladies?
Great.
Okay. All right. So their person's a guest. You're thinking through how many visits they've come. Just mention if it's the first time, they get a tour of the cafe. And the next slide will explain in more detail what the tour of the cafe looks like. If they come to the front door, they've been there before, it's their second or third entry. You enter them in agency. And they've already had a tour of the cafe. So now you can say, hey, you've been here a couple of times. Would you like to go to new member introduction? So NMI is our shorthand for new member introduction. It's the formal invitation to membership. So I think the next slide is a tour of the cafe, and then we'll jump to NMI. Yeah. So first time visit, they get a tour, all the lovey-dovey, all the yummy food. Talk about who we are as a cafe and what we are inviting them into, what we're inviting them to observe as they make their decision. Okay, so after 3 visits, a person has had that tour, they've come a few times, and they have the opportunity to say, okay, I've checked you out 3 times, I've heard what your membership model is, I'm gonna decide, yes, what did you say? New member introductions tomorrow, I'll be back tomorrow, I'm gonna sign up and just be a happy camper for the rest of my life. Or they might say, I'm not quite ready. I'm realizing I'm about to get a full-time job or go back to school, so I can't keep a commitment to a once-a-week circle. I think you guys are awesome. I think I might maybe do your 12-step meetings that are next door, but right now my schedule doesn't allow it. So not ready for membership. Then we say, okay, great. Thanks for being a visitor several times. When classes are out or you're on a break from work, please come back and check out new member introduction. So that's the process. Let's see this. Summary just for your reference where you can review these materials. And again, we are resources with questions. And that's done. I'm going to stop share. How are we doing? That was a long one. I think we're a little bit ahead of schedule, just a tiny bit, but how are we doing?
Ruby, you can open it up for questions too. You have 5 minutes for that.
Okay. What she said, let's do that. Or you've been asking questions all along, so if you're exhausted, that's totally fine too. Throw them in the chat or raise your hand. Or shout out, really.
That was very informative, that I'm so new to the cafe. I would say we need to really let the person know about the rules. You know, I know they come for the first time, like you said, all the, you know, the lovey-dovey stuff, but when you're becoming a member, I think it's very important to meet people where they are with the rules. Like, did you kind of understand, the rules? Because this is a word of mouth thing too. So someone may come and like you here and then they're going to bring someone. So I'm thinking I would really want them to know the rules and, what you're stepping into.
Angela, that is so spot on, because you can't hold someone accountable to love with love unless they know what you're holding them accountable to. You have to have an agreement. So absolutely. And I have to say, sometimes I get sloppy with my words. When I say lovey-dovey stuff, I mean that in the best possible way.
So would that include a handout as part of intake?
Yep, there are, Crystal and her team at the front door have descriptions of what the cafe is about and the member agreements. So yes, people can take those away and think about them at home after a visit. Absolutely.
Ruby, we have a question in the chat from Aaron asking, are 12-step programs a part of Recovery Cafe?
So no, they are not. As you may know, 12-step programs really are standalone and by design independent organizations. So we are partners with them. We create space and we rent space to them. So they are meetings in our locations, but they're not part of the cafe per se. They have a separate entrance. They have their own keys, and we can lock after hours they meet. So then they're not part of the cafe. And what that means is, if it's a 12-step meeting that doesn't necessarily have a sobriety requirement, then a person has a place to go and get support if that day it's not a good day for them in the cafe. I'm sure the nature of this conversation is going to come up again and again as you unfold and begin to receive members. So